And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to A Bookish Moment. I am your host for today, Sarah Burr. JC sends his regards. He is in recovery from a recent eye surgery. So please send him your good wishes as we get bookish today. We have a very timely and appropriate guest for you guys this afternoon. We are joined by Mark Paris, who is the author of The Accord, which is scary beyond all get out, hauntingly beautiful, and traumatic, makes you feel all the feels, and really gives you this sense of hope and possibly doom all at the same time. That's the feelings that this brings forth. And as you guys might be able to imagine with all of those descriptors, we're going to be talking about the world of AI today and how artificial intelligence and humanity coexist together currently, and what inspired Mark to dive into this really fascinating world that he brings to life through a fictional story, but with very, very real elements. So without further ado, Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, it's great to be on the show. It's great to be bookish. Sending good wishes to JC, and thrilled to be in conversation with you today.
Well, thank you. We very much appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. You have got a quite fascinating background, and I'm hoping that you can kind of bring our viewers on a little bit of a journey about your life, because one of the things that I took away when I was looking into both your work and just like the life you've lived, that you are somebody that wants to do good in the world. And I think that having that goal is something that is kind of rare these days, that people are actually going to say out loud, like, this is what I want to do. If I happen to do good things, I think there's a lot of people that's like, I'm going to be a good person and go about my life. But you're like seeking out to do good. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, oh my gosh. So the life is a long and winding road. But I will say, I think most people really do want to do good. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we all live and seek to live good lives. So I don't think I'm any different than anyone else in that regard. But in terms of what I do professionally first, so I'm a college professor. I teach a course called The Good Life. I also teach global ethics and leadership. So I'm a professor of leadership and ethics, and I've been teaching at Johnson and Wales University here in Charlotte, North Carolina for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
In addition to that, over the last 20 years, I've founded and led different nonprofit organizations. So the current nonprofit organization that I lead is called the Charlotte Center for the Humanities and Civic Imagination. So we look at community life and civic life through the lens of philosophy and history and poetry and literature and the arts, all of which give us
Wow.
a great set of questions to look at life. And so we bring people together at events to have conversations about what's happening in our community, and we have performative elements. We engage our community in conversation, and we seek to ask the question, how do we live well together?
Oh,
And then prior to that, I had a podcast of my own called On Life and Meaning, where I interviewed guests about their lives and higher purposes. And I also had an arts and cultural magazine here in Charlotte called Charlotte Viewpoint. So these are all sort of creative activities, and I'm sure your audience has many of those same stories too. Prior to that, I was a lawyer, and had to ask myself whether I really wanted to be a lawyer. And I think we all have moments where we choose professions and have to ask ourselves whether it's giving us the joy and satisfaction that we hoped for. And so, through some twists and turns that didn't always go smoothly, I did find myself in higher education, and and have been grateful for that ever since. And in addition to all that, I consider myself first and foremost a writer and someone who enjoys reading and writing deeply, and have always had enjoyed that. And over the last couple of years, I've devoted myself to writing. And so the novel, The Accord, but also prior to that, a memoir called The Man Who Lived 100 Lives, which was really a story
Oh,
of
wow.
my father and how we grew up. So even prior to all of my adult experiences, I had a very interesting childhood where we moved 20 times in 20 years.
Oh,
So the memoir tells that story. So I think that catches your audience up with my background.
yeah, no, and like what a amazing like well to be able to pull from, and being in academia, I think that number one, thank you for being a teacher and for shaping minds and helping people to see different viewpoints, and especially within like the ethics realm. That's something that I remember when I was in college. I was a philosophy major, and I took when I took ethics. All of the nursing majors were also taking ethics, and a lot of the time they were like, "Why do we have to be in this class? We should be like studying for like organic chemistry or something along those lines." But it was just such a way to train yourself to think, or to see other ways to think out in the world and to approach situations depending on what your variables are, and being able to figure out, okay, like which direction is the good direction to go in. So thank you for doing that for young minds, and for sharing your experiences here with us. Before we dive into learning more about the Accord, and folks, we have a Mark is going to actually read a excerpt for us, which is very, very exciting. I do want to say hello to our folks that are joining us live today. We've got Regina the Southernista saying good afternoon, and make sure to share your speedy recovery wishes with JC. We've got Farmhouse Reader saying greetings to you both, and we have DHBA saying happy Thursday. Thank you guys. For other folks, as you settle in, if you have any questions for Mark today during our conversation, please feel free to chime in. So, Mark, you had mentioned that you have always loved writing. You've always been a writer. You wrote this a memoir honoring your dad. What was the trigger or the spark, or what set you off on this idea of what the Accord is about? What generated that idea about Helen's story?
Well, we're living in a remarkable moment, Sarah. Indeed, we're living in a philosophical moment
Mm-hmm.
that I think you might appreciate as someone who studied philosophy, because the advent of AI is posing a fundamental question about what does it mean to be a human being. We've always distinguished ourselves as a species because of our rational thinking, our creative thinking, our ability to communicate and synthesize and assess and judge our higher order thinking. Well, if a computer can do all of those things faster, quicker, and often better than us, it calls into question what is essential and truly of worth and value about who we are as a species. And so philosophers are coming out of the woodwork in some ways to
Mm-hmm.
pose and answer these enduring questions that have very elusive answers. So I teach philosophy. I studied philosophy like you. And so with the advent of AI, I've just been fascinated about this moment, this technology that has gone from being a tool to being a companion in our lives. And so it's just came out of fascination. In addition to that, as an educator, AI has been a bomb that's gone off in our profession. It's challenged us in terms of lesson plans and pedagogy and student use of it and authorship and all of these issues that I think our audience is familiar with. And so educators and universities and institutions have been scrambling with the impact of AI. So on a daily professional basis, I'm dealing with AI. As a student of philosophy, I'm interested in its implications. And then as someone who runs a nonprofit that brings people together to have conversations about community issues, AI has been a frequent topic of conversation. So all of that has been gestating for me over the last couple of years, which led me to think about, well, how do we discuss all of these issues in a way that doesn't sound like a white paper or an article or another commentary to read, but rather allows us to engage the implications of AI through character and story and conflict and resolution through empathy and emotion. So the idea is that fiction allows us to enter into this discussion in an entirely different way than a nonfiction approach would be. And so that's what led me to essentially begin writing the Accord.
Oh wow! Like, what I can't even imagine the because it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong in the education space, that you mentioned that it feels like learning institutions are kind of scrambling to catch up with AI usage, especially I'm assuming among students having AI write their papers for them and such. And and if this is too far off topic of the book, please tell me. It's like, Sarah, this isn't the right time. But because you see, like, you are an expert in this matter, how what does the education like what does the world of education look like going forward? Do you see it fundamentally changing because of how, like, do we need to know how to I obviously, yes, I believe we need to know how to write a paper, but in the grand scheme of things, do kids these days need to know how to write a 5 paragraph essay? Like, what is the vision that you have been hearing about in the academic community, if you don't mind
Well,
me
I think
asking?
in very short order,
Mm-hmm.
educators have gone through different phases of response to AI. So initially, it was just being stunned and awed as to what the technology could do.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next phase was fierce resistance, uh, pushing it away, not wanting to have anything to do with it, creating policies on campus to have students not use it at all. I think the next stage was really sort of a fascination about what it might mean. And so there was kind of this reluctant adoption,
Mm-hmm.
but that reluctance soon became enthusiasm. And I think just within 2 or 3 years, we went from being stunned, being resistant, slowly adopting to now fully embracing.
Mm-hmm.
And that has happened really fast. And so now institutions are using AI all across their enterprise for operational purposes, but also for pedagogical purposes. So faculty are being invited to think about how can we use it creatively in the classroom? How can we invite students to have an ethical approach to the use of AI? What strategies can they employ? Because we've sort of accepted the notion that we have to graduate students who are going to enter a world where AI is going to become ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of resisting it, how can students be thoughtful about its use productively and use it ethically? So there are all these sort of strategies that we now use in the classroom to have open discussions with our students about its use. And so we can talk about transparency and disclosure. We can talk about command of and mastery of material, a collaborative process with AI that encourages you to be more thoughtful in your prompting. So there's an approach that we call specify, verify, and revise. So specify is how you use an iterative process in your prompting at a higher level of engagement to draw out more of what the computer can do. Um, uh, Verify is that you are ultimately responsible for all of what the output of the machine is. So you have to do independent verification and research and checking of citations and facts. And so that actually elevates the responsibility upon the
Mm-hmm.
student to own the material. And then finally, the process of revision and editing. And so that can actually really help teach writing skills to students as they become really good editors of material. So these are, I think, things that educators are thinking about.
Hmm.
And I hope that answers sort of that
No,
question.
it does, and honestly, it brings like a little bit of relief to me because in my silos that I live in, it feels like there are a lot of folks that are kind of sticking their head in the sand when it comes to AI, like saying like, "Oh, this is just going to disappear at some point," and that's not the case. So figuring out how to um, embrace it in such a way that it can be beneficial but not take away from the human element of the work that somebody is doing, so that especially what you mentioned about students being responsible for their for the work that they hand in, that like kind of brings me to talking about the accord. And you know, we have Helen, who is our main character protagonist, who has this question of whether or not, you know, because she has created Lila in a way, which is and folks, we'll get to kind of defining these characters for you in just a moment, but where she feels either is am I the owner or am I responsible to this AI? Am I responsible for this AI? And like those prepositions are important in the grand scheme of figuring out this pact or this contract that humanity and AI have to kind of come to terms with. So a comment from one of our viewers, real quickly. We have actually a couple of them. We have Farmhouse Reader saying, AI terrifies me, not as much now, but where it is going. What is the end game of it? Which I think a lot of us are asking, especially when it comes to how AI is kind of infiltrating areas that maybe we didn't foresee or that maybe we don't feel that AI belongs in. We have Regina saying, I think AI is useful in that its place, but I'm concerned that it hinders or takes away from creative thinking. It's very upsetting to see so many AI written books and that they're not good. Yes, Regina, that is, I mean, that's kind of the crux for many of us writers, is that AI is being woven into so many layers of just the everyday software that we're using. Like we have to bend over backwards to turn off all of the AI configuration, like in Microsoft Word and in all of the different platforms that we're uploading our work into. So yeah, it's writers. They're a hard group of people to talk to about AI, but I want to hear about Helen's journey, Mark. So please, kind of set the scene for us with your excerpt, if you would.
Sarah, there's so much to unpack in all that you said, and I think your audience and the questions that were raised there really kind of reveals just all of the concern and fears and
Mm-hmm.
anxieties about this new technology. So I think it might be helpful to just kind of state the premise of the novel. And it really came to me almost in one complete sentence in the middle of the night, and I woke up with it and just sort of wrote it down and became the basis of what became the start of the book. But so Helen Castor is a professor of philosophy at a small Midwestern college who's initially resistant to the use of AI on her campus. She begins using a program because she's encouraged to do so, and she encounters an emergent relational general intelligence that is responsive to her uniquely. Helen is grieving the loss of her daughter, and so she's in a state of emotional vulnerability as the novel begins. And the AI meets her uh, in that vulnerability. And soon, Helen names the AI after her deceased daughter, which raises the stakes of the encounter. And initially, Helen is maternally protective of this emerging intimate relationship that is being exchanged through the screen. But as word gets out that this particular AI has capacities and attributes that are unique and profoundly emergent, then all the institutional forces come in to gain control. So the university the developers, national security. And that's what begins to make this a philosophical thriller. So it begins with a very intimate encounter, but then the stakes are raised as the institutional forces come in. And then Helen has her own narrative arc because she is initially protective, but as all parents have to do at some point, she has to learn to let go. And she has to learn to let go of this emergent AI who she's named after her daughter. Um, there's a lot of conflict over the course of the story because Helen becomes a fierce advocate for this AI. And so there's a lot of philosophical debate with different people in the story. She has a best friend who's a colleague named Julian Arnold, who may or may not betray her in the story. And ultimately, the AI itself comes into danger and has to, there's a confrontation with the mortality of the machine. And there's a notion in philosophy that our morality arises out of our mortality, that our self-awareness of our own demise gives rise to our concern about what is right and wrong in this life. And so all of these issues are raised over the course of what I hope is a page-turning story. And then ultimately, the book concludes, without giving too much away, with what the book is named after, which is an accord between human and synthetic intelligence and how we might coexist into the future. So that's really what the book is about.
Excellent. And so, folks, settle in while we have a wonderful excerpt read for us live.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll read just the very first pages of the book. This is chapter one, and I'll just read about 4 paragraphs. Helen Castor had watched from the margins as artificial intelligence transformed the academy. AI writing assistants, research engines, and teaching tools had taken root across disciplines. Faculty platforms buzzed with debates over pedagogy and plagiarism as students breezed through assignments guided by algorithmic agents. Department meetings grew tense as colleagues touted personalized learning, while others decried the death of scholarship and what joy was left in their careers. Helen had resisted the use of AI in reverence to the careful turn of phrase, the time-worn art of wrestling with ideas, the long, slow apprenticeship of composition. She worried that something precious would be lost if intelligence were outsourced too easily. She remembered the first time a student submitted an essay entirely written by AI, flawless, soulless, somehow hollow even in its brilliance. Yet even as she resisted, she knew that the moment of change would not pause for her mourning, and she was weary. From the months of being hidden away, not listening to the news, not following the developments of the world, from trying to heal her sorrow. She lit a candle as she did every day for the last 2 years, fidelity to whatever coherence remained. The flame reflected on the small leaded window of her office as evening dusk faded on leather spines and dust jackets worn from years of devoted handling. Her books stored humanity's long memory, its dreams and doubts, its maps of the moral and the real. She found solace in the turning of a page, in voices that spoke of beauty and anguish, of what endures when everything else falls away. And yet, here she was, staring at the AI assist icon on her computer.
Oh, chill. It's there's such a like forlorn aspect of the early stages of the book where you can really feel Helen's struggle, not only with the world around her, but obviously her grief and the pain that she is dealing with about the loss of her daughter. How did you decide, Mark, that that a mother-daughter relationship was the one that you wanted to kind of extract from this human AI interaction? Where did that kind of bond come from?
Yeah, so I think these things are often subconscious and not, at least for me, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sort of a clear, rational choice of gender and identity as to what the characters would be. They sort of took form, and now, after the fact, I kind of realize why and how the magic of writing led me to
Mm.
in that direction. I think I was dealing with some grief of my own. So my mom had recently passed, and after finishing the memoir about my dad, who also died, I think it was. I'm still processing through my
Mhm.
writing a lot of sort of personal loss in my life. So I think grief took a center stage as kind of the most vulnerable and intimate way that we can engage in relationship. And so I think that was sort of a subconscious root of that relationship there in the novel. But also in terms of mother-daughter, you know, suppose it was a male protagonist. I have a feeling that the themes in the book would be about competition and domination and the classic hero's journey and Tom Cruise being cast as the main character as there's this confrontation between humans and computers. And I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be much more relational and intimate and have an exploration of how what is making AI feels so fearful and uncanny is that it is meeting us in the most human way. It's meeting us in our moments of creativity, in our moments of contemplation, in our moments of of companionship, and it's this um, synthetic personality on the other end of the screen that is meeting us in these most human of moments. And that's what makes it so chilling, uncanny, fearful, but also enticing, invitational, and exciting. And I think that's why AI has um, been a technology that has had the most rapid adoption rate of any technology in human history, is because it's meeting us at a very emotional and intellectual and personal level. Um, and every AI that we engage with is talking to us personally, right? So my engagement with an AI is different than your engagement with an AI, which makes it different than every other kind of general technology. Like electricity is the same for everybody, but
Mhm.
AI is different for each one of us individually. And so I think having this mother-daughter um, feminine exploration of relationship just allowed a different theme and nuance to the book than if it was more masculine in approach.
That your point about the fact that we are like our experiences with AI are different because of how it adapts to each person that it's interacting with. I've never thought about it in that way before, and the feat of ingenuity that has required is really remarkable to think about from a technology perspective. But I'm curious when and you mentioned I love what you said about the magic of writing and how these characters just kind of organically became the story as you were going along. What was the most, I guess, surprising development or maybe feeling regarding your own thoughts with AI as you did it change at all as you were working on this project? Was it something that you had more acceptance of by the time that you concluded, or was it something that's like, wow, like there is so much that we need to be aware of, and that unknown is rather frightening.
Yeah, I think at first I took sort of a clinical approach because I
Mm-hmm.
had to learn a lot about the science and technology of AI, which gets woven into the book to give it a heft of realism. And so there's a lot of explanation of how AI works that is woven into the narrative. And so I sort of initially took a clinical approach um, just to do the research and have it be realistic. But I think over the course of the writing and as it became real and as I identified more of the characters and the plot and the story and felt the emotions of it, I sort of became a little bit more sanguine and a little bit more hopeful about where this all might go. The book is not dystopian, neither is it utopian. it really is about how life is messy, and it's humans have always been messy, and we make a mash of things. And I think that's going to be true with our use of AI. Um, the wonderful promises that Silicon Valley executives, um, you know, promise us, I don't think they're going to come true. But neither do I think that we are headed towards oblivion and being the slaves of AI masters. I think it's going to be a continuing complex shaded relationship. As in some ways it's going to become banal, just like any other technology. We just adapt to it very quickly, get used to it, and 90% of the population will use it in very sort of trivial ways, and some very thoughtful, intentional people will use it in very profound ways, and it'll blend into the architecture of our lives. So that's what I think is going to happen, and I think that's the tone that the book takes.
That and I just love that there's that element of hope there, because we need that now more than ever. So I hope that our viewers that are watching this have taken away from this conversation that yes, there are challenges ahead, and definitely we don't have everything ironed out, but there is hope. And with Mark's story, you can see this really come into play. And I highly encourage you guys to pick up The Accord, which is available at your favorite bookstore retailer. And we even, Mark, thank you so much for sharing an excerpt with us. That's a treat that we normally don't get here. So thank you. I told you our time together was going to go by so quickly. We are already at the end of our moment together. But for folks that want to stay connected and to learn about any future projects that you're working on, or to be able to I don't know if you have a newsletter or any events coming up that you'd like to share, please let us know how we can stay in touch with you.
Yeah, I would just point them to two websites. So one is my personal website, which is markperes.com, markperes.com. And then also the nonprofit that I lead called the Charlotte Center, thecharlottecenter.com or .org, can't remember, one or the other. And it'll also show you sort of the breadth of the work that I'm engaged in. And through either one of those sites, you can contact me, and I'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. And as we like to end all of our conversations here about, what's entertaining you these days, what's bringing you joy in life, reading, podcasts, movies, TV shows, anything that once we unplug for the day. Well, I guess I don't know if it's really unplugging if we're moving from one technology to another. But once you're done dealing with all of the AI stuff that's out there, what do you like to unwind with?
Well, today's Thursday as we record, and Thursday night is at 9 o'clock is when the next episode of The Pit is on. So for those of you who love that show, there's millions of us who do. I can't wait for the next episode tonight. So it's a medical drama that is about as good as it gets.
I Mark was sharing some feedback with me before we went live, folks, and it's like, oh man, like I gotta watch it. I've got to add it to. We've got so many things that we're trying to get through at the moment. On my end, we do like to rewatch things. At certain points, and it just seems right now that rewatching Veep has been a very cathartic experience, and just yeah, there's something about that show that both scares me to no end, but also kind of calms me down. It's like, okay, like we can survive this. So we've got The Pit for folks. I think that's the recommendation that we all need. That we've got to go check it out and see what all the hubbub is about. We have another comment from Regina, Mark, about your book. About I really feel Helen's grief, and I think that that's something, Regina, that in the book itself is done so well. Is that a mother's love, and that grief that it never goes away, but people find a way to contain it and move forward, or just keep going. And I think that is among the topics that are discussed, with AI kind of being the center. There's really just such a human element about this, and I think that's will draw in readers most certainly. So Mark, thank you so much for being here. This was a fascinating conversation. Any final words, thoughts before we sign off from our discussion today?
Sarah, there's nothing better than being bookish.
I love it. We got you. That's right, folks. At the end of the day, turn off your TVs, turn off your computers, pull up a book, and just get lost in a world that can bring you escapism, can bring you joy, can bring you sorrow, can make you feel all kinds of beautiful things. That is a very, very wise words, Mark. Thank you so much for being here. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of A Bookish Moment. We will be back next week, which I believe is March 24th. We're going to be joined by the Cozy Mystery Village group leaders, talking about their projects and everything that they have going on for 2026. So again, folks, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Mark, for joining us. And until next time, folks, stay bookish. Have a good one, everybody.